Hi, hello everyone. This is Dr. Chiranjeevi Manike, Professor in Data Science and Cybersecurity Department, MLR Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. As part of Deep Learning video lecture series, in this third lecture, we are going to discuss about artificial neural networks. So, in this, I am going to cover mainly what is a neuron that is in our brain, and then what is an artificial neural network and how these artificial neural networks are built based on this neurons, and then the basic building block of this artificial neural network, that is perceptron. So we'll see what is perceptron and how the perceptron works. So let us try to understand the neurons, but I'm not good at the neuroscience, but I would like to give a brief about what information is required. Why? Because the artificial neural networks are built based on this neurons in our human brains. So let us try to understand how a neuron would processes a very basic information, that is to link to the artificial neural networks. So neurons are the nerve cells that send messages all over our body to allow to do everything, that is breathing to talking, eating, walking and thinking. So neurons are information messengers. So they use the electrical and both the chemical signals, the electrical and the chemical signals, to send the information between the different areas of the brain, as well as between the brain and the spinal cord and the entire body. So a neuron has mainly the three basic parts, that is a cell body and axon and dendrites. So these are the three basic parts of a neuron. So based on this, artificial neural networks have been built. So within the cell body, a nucleus which controls the cell's activities and contains the cell's genetic materials. And the axon looks like a long tail, and it sends messages from the dendrites, look like branches of a tree, and receives the messages for the cells. So a neuron communicates with each other, that is by sending chemicals, that is called as a neurotransmitters, across a tiny space called as a synapse, that is between axons and the dendrites of nearby neurons. So what is an artificial neuron? So artificial neuron, the artificial neural network, it is a computing system patterned after the operation of neurons in the human brain. So as we already discussed, what are three major parts of a neuron in a human brain. So, and if you look at the different parts and what the function of each part, like dendrites, so these receives the signals from other neuron cells. And the cell body, it contains the cell nucleus, and axon, that is this part, and that conducts electrical impulses along the neuron cells. So axon terminals, and these transmits electrical and chemical signals to other neuron cells and electro cells. So what is a perceptron? So here let us just this artificial neural network. So neuron, that means artificial neuron, that is based on the neuron cell in our body. And what is artificial neural network? So network means it is a network of all neurons. So as I think you can go back to this previous, here you can see this is a one neuron and this is another neuron. Like there are many billions of neurons in our human brain. When like the information always like sensor organs like eyes, ear, so that information would be transmitted, and the decision, the corresponding the activities would be done based on that. So I'm not good at this, but that is how the information would be processed, and the same that is inspired by this. So they built artificial neural networks. So artificial neural network is a network of neurons, like the many neurons. So that we will see in detail in the coming lectures. So next one is a perceptron. So perceptron is a simple, it's a basic building block of a neural network. So that classifies the inputs into the two major categories. So it is a simplified model of a biological neuron, and it was introduced by the Frank Rosenblatt in 1957. As I said in the very beginning, first lecture. So these all artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, they have been introduced. They had introduced way back I think 1957, etc. But why the hype now for this? Because I have already explained what is the reason. So perceptrons are used in artificial neural networks and help to spark the modern artificial intelligence revolutions. So how in our brain, like a particular information, like suppose if an information received from the sense organs and the sensory neurons, how that information would be transmitted. While transmitting that, how what neurons would be activated. That means activating a neuron means it allows to pass the information to the other neurons. Each neuron would be connected to the many other neurons. So that means each neuron input, like suppose if this is a neuron and this will take an input, and the output of the neuron would be an input to the many neurons. So in this neural network, artificial neural network, so the particular set of neurons will be activated to identify the particular pattern. So that we will discuss in detail in the coming lecture. So this is the basic structure of building block of this perceptron, that is artificial neural network. So this is one neuron, but in artificial neural networks, so there will be many neurons. So that we will see later. So here we can see it takes the n number of inputs. There will be like suppose x1, x2, x3, and these are the inputs. There are some n number of inputs, and these inputs, for each input there will be a weight, like a corresponding weight, like suppose w1, w2, and w3. Like suppose if you want to take a decision, like suppose if you want today, if you want to go to movie, so then and you check what are the conditions, like there will be some conditions are the factors that influence the decision whether you will go to movie or not. So that could be that those factors could be anything, like whether whether the weather condition, whether the transport, if you do not have a transport, and whether you avail the private transport, or and based on the traffic conditions, whether like suppose 1 hour time you have to reach the theater, and would it be possible to reach the theater based on on that particular day and that particular time, the traffic conditions. And if your friend do not want to come, then you would decide not to go. Like there will be many number of factors that is to come to the decision that is to go to the movie or not. So the each factor, that means will be given some weightage. So all the factors would not be given a equal weightage. So each factor would be given a much weightage. Like suppose irrespective of the weather condition, irrespective of weather conditions, so you decided to go to the movie. In that case, so the less the weightage would be given to this weather condition. So you want to go along with your friend, so that is the first priority. So then that will be given a much weightage. So like that, so each input so will be given a respective weightage, that is importance. How these weights been used in this neural networks, that is in training, that we will discuss in detail later. Next, and these weights, and this we are going to find out the sum, that is we would write like sigma I is equal to 1 to n, so xi and wi. So that is the each input would be multiplied with the corresponding weights, and all this would be summed together. So this is the way we can represent this. And here you can see the one more term called as a b here. So that is bias. and this is the effect of the bias also we will see in a couple of examples while illustrate or giving any demo on numerical examples. You would also find the difference or the effect of bias in the neural network. And the bias is mainly used to shift the non-linear activation function, that is to either left or right. It is mainly used to introduce the non-linearity in non-linearity here. So here, so that bias would also be added to this. So B. So this would be supplied to the non-linear activation function that is called as a G. So this would be supplied to the non-linear activation function. As we discussed, like neurons, when the information is propagating from one place to another place in our human brain, a particular set of neurons get fired, and it allows to transmit the information from one place to another place. So from one neuron to the another neuron. So that kind of to mimic that, so we created an activation function. There are some set of activation functions like a ReLU, sigmoid, or tan H, or like those also will be discussed in detail later. So this value would be passed to the non-linear activation function. This is a non-linear. So non-linear activation function. So then, and this here we can define the threshold, like suppose based on the value, incoming value. So from this we are going to get this non-linear activation function with going to throw a output, and based on that, so then we can decide whether the neuron, this activation function should be that is activated or not activated. That means if activation function is activated, means it allows to flow the information to the next phase, that is a output. So if not, so that we can decide, that is we can set a threshold value. So like the whatever the value which is written by this nonlinear activation function is more than the threshold value, then the activation function, that function would be activated, then it allows to flow the information, whatever the values need to be supplied, transmitted. And if not, then it will not. So then it will not allow to transmit the information. So then the output is produced, like this is the output. So this all how we can learn, and everything, all this we can you will understand in a numerical example that we will discuss in the coming lectures. So this is a way, this is how what is a basic structure of a base, or a basic building block of a artificial neural network, and how a particular perceptron or a basic building block of this would works. So in this artificial neural networks, there will be like the neural networks would contain the millions of neurons, like suppose like, and this is one artificial neural networks, let us say, and this artificial neural network would be divided into this, each one is called as a layer. And the artificial neural network, all the layers are divided into the three main categories, like a input layer, and these what are there in between the, and this is the output layer, and in between this input and output layer there are hidden layers. So these are the hidden layers. So this is a one neuron, like there will be many number of neurons in a real world scenario. So that you will understand in the coming lectures. So that is the way perceptron, a particular neuron would process the information. Here you can see here, and this neuron, these are all connected, and this also will be connected to all the neurons in the next layer. Like all these connections, there will be, right, it looks like more dense network. So it connects. So then each neuron in a particular layer would allow, like if this particular neuron is activated, then it allows to flow the information. So that, and the rest all, like, so there are four neurons are connected, are going to take the input from this particular neuron. So then like that, the information is propagated from this direction to the output. So in this case, like suppose actual output is y, and this is the predicted output value. So the difference would be identified, and this is called as a error. This is called as error. So this error need to be minimized. So to minimize this error, so here how this weights, right? Because we cannot change this the input values. So we cannot change the input values. So these weights only would be adjusted. So how and how it is going to affect the output, all this would be discussed in the coming lectures. So as I said, the term bias in this artificial neural network mainly used to introduce the non-linearity. So what is a non-linear and linear functions that need to be understood. So non-linear activation function in the deep neural networks are the fundamental to their ability to learn and model complex relationships within the data. So without non-linear activation functions, neural networks would essentially reduce to linear transformations, so limiting their representational capacity and learning capabilities. So here from this diagram you can see here there are some set of data points on this two-dimensional space, and these are all the data points. Cross symbols are data points. There is a linear relationship that is represented in the form of a straight line. So that is this is a linear relationship, but in the real world data, the most of the data is a non-linear. So this kind of a straight lines would not be sufficient to identify the exact relationship between the between the data points, so that the non-linear activation non-linearity or the non-linear functions must be used to identify the relationship that is among the non-linear data. So suppose let us take one simple example. Like suppose, and we have some data set. Let me draw this. Let me take one empty slide. Yeah. So let us take just a quick, a very simple example that is to understand the non-linearity. Like suppose if you take a two-dimensional space and the data, and these are the some data points, and let me take some other different color to represent another set of values. Like these are the different other data points belongs to the different class. So these are some I think this is also red color. So the data distribution is like this. So this is the way. So in this case, like suppose linear, if you rely on the linear relationships, then the linear relationship could be identified like this, or it could be identified like this, or it could be identified like this. In that case, it is not at all a accurate one, because you can see, and if you take any line like, and which that must be separate, are the 90% of the data points or more number of data points should be separated. That means the data points which are belongs to the one class need to be on one side, and the remaining data points which are belongs to another class need to be on the other side of the line. But if you observe these lines and there is no such, so that's why the non-linearity need to be assigned. So let us quickly summarize what we discussed in this lecture. So in this lecture we discussed mainly how neurons how a neuron, that is a cell in nerve cells, transmits information or a signal, that is mainly the electrical and the chemical signals in our brain, and how a particular neuron get activated or fired, and how when it fired, and how it allows the information, and how one neuron is connected to another neuron, and then how, and the artificial neural networks, that is how these are built based on this neurons. So then how the artificial neural networks would look like, and also we have discussed mainly the perceptron, that is a basic building block of artificial neural network, and how it takes the input, and and it passes to this activation function and then output, and how the error would be measured. And that these are all just breadth concepts. And the next lecture, in a perceptron example, we will discuss in detail and in depth, so that you would you will understand what is a perceptron, then so that we'll go to the complex or another artificial neural network, and then we'll move on to the complex neural network, and we'll see the variety of neural networks in this deep learning. Thank you for watching.